I've kind of sat back and thought hard about this move because I don't think it's something meant to be taken at face value. The Celtics were clearly trying to go for draft picks as it was something that was reported, and a relationship with JB clearly wasn't it anymore. I originally had the video titled as When You Give Everything for a Franchise But Nobody Cares, but I decided to pivot to a more discussion-based video instead of a tribute/emotional video. I'll be beginning with the 76ers. I know the rule of my trade discussions is you start with the team who gave up the main player, which would be the Boston Celtics in this situation, but I want to start with the 76ers because they're the easier and less interesting team to discuss within this trade. The 76ers have been insanely active in free agency, acquiring Dean Wade probably as a starting power forward, as well as picking up Anthony Simons on an incredible contract. Within this trade, they get off the worst contract in the league in Paul George, very recently turning 36 years old, while being on a max contract for 2 more years. They did give up 4 picks within this deal, but you get a younger player by a bit more than half a decade in Jaylen Brown, who's clearly the better, more impactful player. Brown will probably be a better defender due to him not having to exert himself as much as he did last year offensively due to the 76ers having Maxey, Embiid, and Edgecombe. But that offensive versatility and firepower is kind of where we also reach the problem with this trade for the 76ers. You get the better player in Jaylen Brown, but he has 1 more year left on his contract than Paul George, and you're probably paying him the Supermax contract the moment he's eligible for extension. Stacked upon the Embiid max contract, as well as having the Maxey contract on your books, the Sixers didn't really open up any type of flexibility. Not only has Brown publicly looked down on Embiid's game on stream,
flopping has ruined our game. Joel Embiid is a great player, one of the best bigs in basketball history. Flops. He know it. This ain't breaking news. That's just my opinion. I'm not the only one that had that opinion. Some of y'all gonna be mad about that opinion, and some of y'all could kiss my ass.
But let me present you a, most likely, tough question to answer. Whose team is it really now? It could be Joel Embiid's, the big man who has won an MVP while wearing a uniform, and the man who put your team back on the map and sacrificed his body again and again in order to keep your franchise afloat. It could be Maxey's, the guard who has improved and elevated his game every time the offseason concludes, and also the main candidate, in my opinion, who led you to victory against your bracket demons in the Boston Celtics. But then, it could also be Jaylen Brown's, the man who capped off the process, the most paid player in the entire league, and one of the most versatile and explosive shot makers in the entire league. Not only do you have to choose between those 3, but you also have to count for VJ's touches and his own personal development. Yeah, it gives them options and multiple go-to actions against every type of scheme, but the locker room could easily become toxic and the offense could easily become heavily isolation-based, assuming Embiid is still on the roster coming next season. Jaylen Brown is definitely the better player, but Paul George is the better mentor for VJ Edgecombe, in my opinion, a better off-ball shooter, as well as a better fit next to your franchise guard and center, as he was someone who didn't need as many touches to be effective. Before I get into the Celtics, I do want to say that the 76ers 100% did win the trade. By giving my gripes and negatives about this trade on the Sixers' part, I am not saying that they didn't upgrade by a significant portion by sending off PG and acquiring Jaylen Brown for a mediocre draft pick return. Now we get into the part of the trade that everybody seems to hate, the Boston Celtics. Before we get to the draft picks that the Celtics got in return for Jaylen Brown, I just want to say that Paul George could actually be a bit of a better fit than Jaylen Brown was next to Tatum. Taller, more lengthy, better off-ball player, and is generally a better pure ball handler. Hold on. By no means am I saying that Paul George is the better player. I'm just justifying the fit next to Tatum, especially if Boston can get the Paul George that assisted in eliminating them in the 3-1 comeback. Paul George does have 1 less year on his contract compared to Jaylen Brown, and that's it for the Paul George segment of the Celtics trade. The Boston Celtics reportedly wanted a draft pick-focused trade package for Jaylen Brown, and they received a 2031 unprotected first-rounder, 2 second-rounders, as well as a potential swap in 2028 within the first round. I am in agreement that the return is garbage for Jaylen Brown, and the only thing preventing you from acquiring Giannis's contract instead of Paul George's is Hugo Gonzalez and Baylor Shireman, and by default, the Celtics lose this trade. People say this is a stepping stone trade, but there was a report, if you wish to believe so, that if a Jaylen Brown for Trey Murphy trade was desired, it would have been said and done by now. Also, if you wanted to get Trey Murphy, why go risk getting Paul George to then go acquire Trey Murphy? Why the Boston Celtics traded Jaylen Brown in the first place is most likely contractual purposes, and probably just them not believing in this Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown era anymore. Again, the Philadelphia 76ers definitely did win this trade, but I want to say that it isn't a guaranteed victory like the Luka to the Lakers on the 76ers side, and that isn't a guaranteed play-in basketball trade on the Celtics side. For my final grading evaluations, I'd say the 76ers get a B and the Celtics get a C+. A. If this gets posted in time, happy 4th of July, and I'll be back soon to discuss some Walker Kessler talks and the Eastern Conference as a whole.